Hi, everybody. It's Cody at Cody's Reading Time. Today I'm back with another nature, myth, and stories for little children story. And this one's called A Fairy Story. I hope you enjoy it, and here we go. Some fairies once lived in a dark glen in a pine forest. They were real fairies, many of them not higher than a pin. Their greatest treasure was a magic cap, which had been in the fairy family for many generations. The most wonderful thing about the cap was that it fitted exactly anyone who wore it. When one fairy put it on, he and all the others became invisible. A race of giants lived among the mountains near them. They wanted the fairy cap more than anything else in the world. One warm day, when the elves were away from home, a giant came into the glen. He was seeking just such a cool place for his afternoon nap. He was so large and the glen so small that when he laid down, he almost filled the entire valley. The music of a fairy brook soon lulled him to sleep. Perhaps you have heard how a giant snores and how his breath becomes flowing in great puffs. The giant was snoring and puffing when the fairies came towards home. They heard the strange sound and thought a great storm was brewing. "There's never been such a wind in the glen," said the fairy queen. "We will not go down to it. We must seek shelter for tonight on this hillside." Just then they came to the giant's ear. "Here's a fine cavern," the queen said, and she stopped and waved her wand. A fairy hastened forward to carry the cap to a safe place in the cave, for that was always their first care. Just then the giant awoke. He raised his great hand. Oh, how miserable the fairies were! They wept and moaned until even the dull ear of the giant heard them. It was a sound like the tolling of tiny silver bells. He listened and understood that the wee voice of the prisoner in his ear was saying. He was the wisest and most kind-hearted of all the giants. He helped the little creature gently out and into his hand and looked at him in wonder. He'd never seen a fairy before. In vain, the brave little fellow tried to conceal the precious cap. The giant saw the wonderful star and knew at once that he had the treasure cap of the elves. He set the fairy carefully upon the ground and shouted for joy as he found that the cap exactly fitted his own great head. The poor fairies could no longer see him, but they heard a sound like thunder as he hurried over the stones toward his home. They were now afraid to move about while the sun shone. They crept under leaves and into shells and cried bitterly. By sundown, every plant in the glen was wet with their tears. The sharp eyes of the eagle on the mountain top saw them with a great pity filled in his heart. "I must help the fairies," he said. "Otherwise, I should not be worthy to be called the king of birds." He went directly to the home of the giants and demanded the cap, but they refused to give it to him. All that an eagle could do, he did, but as the giants wore the invisible cap, he couldn't see them. He could only hear their great voices. He knew, however, that the giants were proud of their great size and strength and liked, above all things, to be seen. He was sure that they would not wear the cap in battle, and he did not lose hope. One day, they carefully placed it under a large stone on the mountainside below them. The keen eye of the eagle was watching. He flew fearlessly to the spot as soon as the giants had left it. He lifted the stone in his great talons and was soon flying away with the cap to the fairy glen. The giants saw him and knew at once what he was doing. They began a fierce attack upon him. The air was filled with flying arrows and sharp rocks. Drops of blood fell on the mountainside, and many feathers fluttered down, but the brave eagle was soon out of their reach. He did not stop until the cap was safe in the fairy queen's lap. There was great rejoicing among the fairies that day. They had a feast in the eagle's honor and healed his wounds with fairy magic. On the mountainside, wherever the blood and feathers fell, there sprang up trees with feather-like leaves and blood-red berries. All the giants, fairies, plants, and animals knew why they grew. The unselfish love in the eagle's blood could not die, but lived again in the beautiful trees. But people who did not know how they came there called them mountain ash trees. And that's the end of that story. I hope you enjoyed it. And please subscribe. I upload new stories every single day for all ages. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.